Charlie Woods walked off the 18th green at the U.S. Junior Amateur with his head down, his shoulders slumped, and the weight of a name he never asked for pressing down on him like 100 pounds of lead. He had just missed the cut in a 14-man playoff, his third straight attempt at the most prestigious junior tournament in the country, ending in the kind of heartbreak that makes grown men question everything they thought they knew about themselves. But it wasn't the missed putt that got everyone talking. It wasn't the bogey. It was the moment before that swing, when the click of a cell phone camera shattered his concentration mid-backswing and sent his chip shot into the rough. Charlie turned around, dropped his club, and said two words that are now echoing through every golf forum, every sports talk show, and every text message between scouts who have been watching this kid since he was 6 years old. He said, "Really, dude?" And in that moment, the golf world watched a 17-year-old boy crack under the kind of pressure that would break a 40-year-old tour pro. But here is what nobody saw coming. Here is the part of the story that the cameras missed. Because Charlie Woods did not walk away from that course defeated. He walked away with a fire in his eyes that his father would recognize immediately, the same fire that drove Tiger Woods to win 15 majors, the same fire that made him the most feared competitor in the history of the sport. And when Charlie got back to his hotel room that night, he made a phone call that is going to change the trajectory of amateur golf forever. He called his dad. And Tiger Woods, the man who has seen it all, the man who has won and lost and risen and fallen and risen again, listened to his son on the other end of that line and heard something that made him go completely silent. Charlie told his father exactly what he was going to do next. And when Tiger hung up the phone, he sat in his chair for a long time, staring at the wall, knowing that what was coming next would make the entire golf world stop and pay attention to a kid who is still too young to vote. The first time Charlie Woods seriously picked up a golf club, he was barely tall enough to see over the bag. Tiger Woods stood off to the side with his arms crossed, wearing that same look of quiet intensity that defined his legendary career. It was just a practice session on a small course in Florida, nothing special, just a father showing his son the basics of a game that would define both of their lives. But even then, even at that young age, something was different about the way Charlie moved the club through the air. There was a fluidity, a natural rotation, a sense of rhythm that most grown men spend decades trying to find. Tiger didn't say much that day. He just watched, the way a master craftsman watches his apprentice make the first cut, knowing that the potential was there, but also knowing the long road ahead. Now Charlie is 17 years old, a rising high school senior committed to Florida State University, and he has spent the last several years trying to carve out his own identity in a sport where his last name carries more weight than any swing or any score ever could. He has won a Team TaylorMade Invitational, been named a first-team All-American by the American Junior Golf Association, and helped his high school team capture a state championship. He has also missed the cut at the U.S. Junior Amateur 3 times in a row, a fact that the critics love to point out, a fact that makes the casual fans wonder if he will ever live up to the hype. But here is the thing about Charlie Woods that the box scores and the ranking numbers do not capture. He is not trying to be his father. He has said it in interviews, whispered it to his coaches, repeated it to himself in the mirror before every tournament. He is trying to be Charlie Woods, a left-handed golfer with a swing that some instructors have called the most fundamentally sound they have ever seen in a junior player. He is trying to build a career on his own terms, on his own timeline, on his own talent. And that journey, that messy, complicated, high-pressure journey, is exactly what makes this story so compelling. Because the golf world has been waiting for Tiger's son to fail. They have been waiting for him to crumble under the weight of expectations that no 17-year-old should ever have to carry. They have been waiting for the moment when the cameras become too much, when the pressure becomes too heavy, when the name becomes a curse instead of a blessing. And on that playoff hole at the U.S. Junior Amateur, when the cell phone clicked and the swing went wrong and Charlie Woods looked up at the crowd with frustration written all over his face, they thought they finally had their answer. They thought they had proof that the son could never live up to the father. But they were wrong. Because Charlie Woods is not done. He is not broken. He is not defeated. He is just getting started. And what he is about to do next is going to make everyone who ever doubted him eat their words. The thing about golf that makes it different from almost every other sport is that there is no teammate to save you, no coach to call a timeout, no moment where you can step off the field and let someone else carry the weight. When Charlie Woods walks onto a course, he walks alone, carrying the name of the greatest player who ever lived on his back and the expectations of millions on his shoulders. And the numbers tell a story that most people do not want to hear. Charlie entered the 2026 U.S. Junior Amateur ranked number 174 by the American Junior Golf Association, a solid ranking by any measure, but a far cry from the dominance his father displayed at the same age. His first round was a 76, 6 over par through the first 5 holes before he found his rhythm and played the next 31 holes in 1 under par. But the damage was already done, and he finished stroke play at 5 over par, tied for 63rd place, just barely scraping into a 14-man playoff for the final 2 spots in match play. The playoff was cruel, the kind of sudden death drama that separates the contenders from the rest, and Charlie needed a birdie on the first hole to keep his dream alive. He hit his tee shot straight down the middle, about 270 yards from the hole, and went for the green in 2, but his second shot found thick rough near the putting surface. Then came the moment that changed everything, the moment that turned a golf tournament into a conversation about the darker side of fame. As Charlie addressed his third shot, a delicate chip that needed to get close for a birdie look, the click of a cell phone camera shattered his concentration mid-swing. His club flubbed through the rough, the ball barely moved, and Charlie turned around with frustration etched across his face and said 2 words that echoed across the internet. "Really, dude?" It was a human moment, a teenage moment, a moment of pure, unfiltered irritation that anyone would feel when a stranger's thoughtlessness ruins something you have worked your whole life for. And in that instant, the golf world divided into 2 camps, the ones who saw a kid cracking under pressure and the ones who saw a kid who had every right to be angry. But here's where the story gets interesting, because that missed chip and that outburst are not the full picture of who Charlie Woods is or what he has already accomplished. Just a few months earlier, in November of 2025, Charlie fired a 2 under 68 in the final round of the Florida Class 1A State Championship, the lowest score of the entire round, to lead his high school team to a 5-shot victory. Tiger Woods was there watching, standing alongside Charlie's mother Ellen Nordegren, a rare public appearance together that spoke volumes about the family's commitment to supporting their son. Charlie's coach at the Benjamin School, Toby Harbeck, revealed after the win that he had dreamed the night before that Charlie would shoot either 67 or 68, and he told Ellen about it that morning in the hotel lobby. A story that sounds too perfect to be true, but speaks to the belief that those closest to Charlie have in his ability. That state championship was the second of Charlie's high school career, following a freshman year title, and it cemented his reputation as a player who rises when it matters most. And then there was the Team TaylorMade Invitational in May of 2025, the victory that changed everything for Charlie's junior career. He entered that tournament ranked number 604 in the AJGA rankings with no career victories, and he walked out a champion after shooting 15 under par across 3 days at Streamsong Resort, beating some of the best junior golfers in the country, including the top-ranked Miles Russell. That one launched him hundreds of spots up the rankings and earned him a first-team AJGA All-American honor, joining a list that includes his father, who made the first team all 4 years of high school and was named Player of the Year in 1991 and 1992. The parallels are obvious, almost too obvious. The father and son now sharing the same All-America line on the same list of junior golf excellence. But the differences are just as important. Tiger was the dominant force of his era, the unquestioned king of junior golf, the player who won 3 U.S. amateurs before turning pro. Charlie is carving his own path, his own timeline, his own identity, and he has chosen Florida State over Stanford, a decision that signals his desire to be his own man rather than follow in his father's footsteps. He will join Miles Russell, the number 1 ranked junior in the country, in one of the most loaded recruiting classes in college golf history, and the Seminoles coach Trey Jones has already built a pipeline that includes Brooks Koepka and Daniel Berger. But none of that success, none of those wins, none of those accolades erased the sting of that playoff loss at the U.S. Junior Amateur. Charlie walked off the course with a bogey and a season of what-ifs, and the cameras captured every second of it. The slumped shoulders, the frustrated mutter, the walk back to the clubhouse that felt longer than any walk he had ever taken. The golf world watched and wondered if this was the moment the legend cracked, if the pressure had finally become too much for a 17-year-old who never asked to be famous. But they missed the part that mattered most, the part that happened later that night in a hotel room far from the cameras and the reporters and the judgmental eyes of the internet. Charlie picked up his phone and called his father, the man who had been through worse and come out the other side, the man who knew exactly what it felt like to have the world watching your every move. And Tiger listened to his son's voice on the other end of the line, heard the frustration and the disappointment and the fire burning underneath it all, and he gave Charlie the one piece of advice that could only come from a father who had been there himself. He told him that the loss did not define him, that the missed chip and the distracted swing were just moments in a career that was barely beginning, that the only thing that mattered was what he did next. And Charlie listened, because that is what sons do. And then he told his father something that made Tiger go quiet, something that hinted at a future so bright that even the greatest champion of all time had to catch his breath. Because Charlie Woods is not done, not even close. He is just getting started, and the path he is about to take is going to make everyone who ever doubted him pay attention. The phone call with his father changed everything for Charlie Woods. Not because Tiger told him something he didn't already know, but because hearing his father's voice, the same voice that had calmed him down after 1,000 bad shots and 100 tough losses, reminded Charlie of something he had almost forgotten in the heat of that playoff. He was 17 years old. He had already accomplished more than most golfers ever would, and he had a future so bright that college coaches were practically fighting over him. Florida State had already secured his commitment, and he was set to join Miles Russell, the top-ranked junior in the world, in one of the most loaded recruiting classes in NCAA history. The Seminoles pipeline under Coach Trey Jones had already produced Brooks Koepka and Daniel Berger, and Charlie was about to walk into that program with the weight of his last name and the fire of that playoff loss burning in his chest. But before he could step onto a college campus, before he could begin the next chapter of his career, Charlie had to finish what he started in high school. He had one more year at the Benjamin School, one more chance to lead his team to a state championship, one more opportunity to prove that the U.S. Junior Amateur loss was not the end of his story, but the beginning of something bigger. And that is exactly what he did, in a performance that reminded everyone why the golf world has been watching him since he was 6 years old. With his father walking the gallery, still recovering from a lumbar disc replacement surgery just a month earlier, Charlie stepped onto the course at Mission Inn Resort and shot a 4 under par 68, the lowest score of the entire final round, to lead his team to a 5-shot victory in the Florida Class 1A state championship. It was his second high school state title in 3 years, and he did it with Tiger and Ellen Nordegren watching from the gallery, a rare public appearance together that spoke volumes about the family's commitment to supporting their son. The cameras captured the moment when Charlie sank his final birdie putt, the one that sealed the win, and the look on his face was not relief or joy or even satisfaction. It was determination, pure and simple, the kind of determination that only comes from a kid who has been counted out and is absolutely determined to prove everyone wrong. But here is the part of the story that the highlight reels do not capture. Charlie's ranking had plummeted from number 21 in his class to number 174 by the time of the U.S. Junior Amateur, a drop that made the critics sharpen their knives and the doubters shout even louder. His sole AJGA victory, the Team TaylorMade Invitational, where he shot 15 under par and beat the best juniors in the country, was outside the 12-month window of contributing events, and the rankings had punished him for it. The same golf world that had celebrated his rise was now ready to write him off, ready to declare that the son could never live up to the father, ready to move on to the next prodigy. But Charlie Woods heard all of that noise, and he did what his father taught him to do. He ignored it. He kept working, kept practicing, kept grinding through the Florida heat and the early morning wake-up calls and the endless hours on the practice green. And when the 2026 season rolled around, when the pressure was at its highest and the expectations were at their lowest, Charlie walked onto the course and did what he has always done. He played his game, quiet and steady and unshakable, letting the clubs do the talking and the scores do the proving. The golf world had written him off after that playoff loss, had decided that he was just another talented kid who couldn't handle the spotlight, had moved on to the next story and the next headline. But Charlie Woods was not done. He was far from done. And the next chapter of his story was about to unfold in a way that nobody saw coming. Not the critics, not the scouts, not even his father, who had watched him rise and fall and rise again and knew better than anyone what his son was capable of. Because Charlie Woods was not just playing to win tournaments. He was playing to prove that he belonged, that the name on his bag did not define him, that he was Charlie Woods, and that was more than enough. The weeks following the U.S. Junior Amateur Playoff loss were quiet for Charlie Woods, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when the wind has died down and the only thing left is the debris and the silence. He retreated to Florida, back to the familiar courses and the familiar faces, back to the practice green where his father first taught him to read the grain with his fingertips. The cameras were gone. The reporters had moved on to the next story, and the golf world had already filed Charlie Woods away in the category of talented juniors who never quite lived up to the hype. But Charlie did not see it that way. He saw the playoff loss as a lesson, a hard one, the kind that burns itself into your memory and changes the way you approach every single shot. He had started that tournament ranked number 174 in the AJGA rankings, a steep drop from his peak of number 21 just a few months earlier, a drop that had nothing to do with his talent and everything to do with the cruel math of junior golf rankings. His breakthrough win at the Team TaylorMade Invitational, the victory that had launched him into the national conversation, had fallen out of the 12-month window of contributing events, and the rankings had punished him for it, dropping him 136 spots in a single update. It was a technicality, a numbers game, the kind of bureaucratic reality that makes no sense to anyone outside the world of junior golf, but it had real consequences. It meant that Charlie was no longer an automatic qualifier for the biggest events, no longer a guaranteed name on the invitation lists, no longer the player that everyone expected to see at the top of the leaderboard. It meant that he had to earn everything the hard way, which is exactly the way his father earned everything, and exactly the way Charlie wanted it. But the U.S. Junior Amateur was different. That tournament was the one that mattered most, the one that Tiger won 3 times in a row from 1991 to 1993, the one that now hands out a Tiger Woods trophy to the winner, a bronze statue of a young Tiger with his arms raised in victory. The irony was not lost on anyone. Charlie Woods playing for a trophy named after his father, carrying the weight of that legacy with every swing. He had failed to make the cut in 2024, shooting 82-80 and finishing at 22 over par, and he had failed again in 2025, shooting 80-74 and finishing at 14 over. But this year was different. This year, he shot 76 on the first day, a rough start that included a bogey and a triple on the opening holes, but he bounced back with a gritty 70 on the second day, an even par round that showed exactly what he was made of. He made the playoff, the 14-for-2 sudden death shootout that would determine the final 2 spots in match play, and for a brief moment, it looked like the story was about to write itself. Charlie's tee shot found the middle of the fairway, about 270 yards from the hole, and he went for the green in 2, the kind of aggressive play that his father made famous. But the second shot found thick rough, the pitch ended up on the fringe, and his 35-foot birdie chip slid past the hole. He 3-putted for bogey, and just like that, the dream was over. 3 players birdied the first playoff hole and moved on, and Charlie was left walking off the green with another missed cut, another what if, another lesson learned the hard way. But here is the part of the story that the box scores do not capture. Charlie Woods did not walk away from that course defeated. He walked away with something far more valuable than a trophy or a ranking point. He walked away with the knowledge that he had played his best golf of the week when it mattered most, that he had fought back from a terrible start and put himself in position to advance, that he had come closer to making the cut than he ever had before. He walked away with the understanding that the game of golf is not about the wins and the losses, not really, but about the process, the grind, the endless hours of practice that eventually add up to something meaningful. And he walked away with the support of his family, his father Tiger and his mother Ellen, who had been there watching the whole time, who had seen the highs and the lows and everything in between, who had never once doubted that their son was on the right path. The images from the ring ceremony in February, when the Benjamin School celebrated its state championship and Tiger and Ellen stood together on stage with their son, are a reminder of something that the critics often forget. Charlie Woods is not just a golfer. He is a 17-year-old kid with a loving family, a bright future, and a father who understands exactly what he is going through. And when the cameras are off and the crowds have gone home, that is what matters most. But the next chapter of Charlie's story is already unfolding, and it involves a decision that could change the entire trajectory of his career.